Someone in Lisbon shares more DNA with a person in Ireland than with their neighbor across the border in Barcelona. This isn't a mistake. It's one of the strangest genetic puzzles in Europe. Portugal and Spain sit on the same peninsula, separated by just a line on a map. They endured the same Roman conquests, the same Moorish rule, the same climate. Yet their DNA tells a completely different story. While Spain became a melting pot of Mediterranean and continental influences, Portugal evolved into something else entirely, a genetic island that has stood apart for nearly 1,000 years. This isn't just about culture or language. This is about Ice Age survivors, a forgotten Germanic kingdom, and a border that changed biology itself. What made the Portuguese so genetically different from the Spanish? The answer begins 20,000 years ago. To crack this mystery, you need to understand that Iberia has two completely different front doors. Spain faces the Mediterranean. For thousands of years, Greeks, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, and Romans poured through its eastern and southern coasts. This created genetic diversity, but it all leaned toward the east. Portugal, however, is the Atlantic fortress. 20,000 years ago, during the last ice age, Western Iberia became a sanctuary. Hunter-gatherers survived here while the rest of Europe froze. When the ice melted, these ancient people moved north along the Atlantic coast. Scientists call this the Atlantic facade. While inland Spain absorbed waves of European migrations, the western edge stayed loyal to its ancient Atlantic roots. This is why Portuguese DNA today mirrors Ireland and Brittany more than Italy. Portugal didn't grow from the land, it grew from the sea. But here's where it gets even stranger. Spain is not a single genetic block. It's a mosaic of wildly different peoples. The Basque in the north carry DNA older than farming itself. The Catalans in the east share deep ties with southern France. The Galicians in the northwest are practically genetic cousins of the Portuguese. Yet, when scientists compare the average Portuguese genome to the average Spanish genome, there's a clear westward shift. Spain absorbed migrations from the continental interior and the Mediterranean. Portugal's story was written in maritime isolation. Its genetic history stayed tied to the Atlantic, while Spain looked inward and eastward. Then, in the 5th century, when everything changed, Rome fell and Germanic tribes flooded into Iberia. Most people know about the Visigoths, who conquered almost all of Spain. But in the northwest, a smaller, quieter tribe arrived, and they would change Portugal forever. The Suebi came from what is now Germany and Central Europe. Unlike the Visigoths, who were constantly fighting and moving, the Suebi did something remarkable. They built a kingdom. The kingdom of the Suebi lasted over 170 years, from 409 to 585 AD. Their capital was Bracara Augusta, modern-day Braga in northern Portugal. While the Visigoths spread thin across the peninsula, the Suebi stayed concentrated in the northwest. This matters genetically. The Visigoths eventually blended into the broader population. The Suebi left a concentrated genetic footprint that still exists today. Northern Portugal carries a clear Scandinavian signal. Markers like I1 and R1BU106 aren't just data points. They're proof that the Suebi didn't just pass through. They became part of the foundation. But the biggest genetic surprise wasn't Germanic. It was something nobody expected. The Moors ruled Iberia for over 700 years. Both Portugal and Spain lived under Islamic caliphates. Logic suggests that southern Spain, which remained under Moorish control until 1492, would carry the most North African DNA. But the data shows the opposite. North African genetic markers are often higher in Portugal than in many parts of Spain, including Andalusia. How is this possible? The answer lies not in how long the Moors stayed, but in what happened when they left. The Reconquista, the Christian reconquest, played out very differently in the two countries. In Spain, Christian kingdoms like Castile expelled entire populations. The Spanish Inquisition intensified this, forcing conversions and expulsions throughout the 15th and 16th centuries. In Portugal, the process was different. Instead of total replacement, there was integration. But why did Portugal choose integration while Spain chose expulsion? As the Portuguese crown moved southward, it didn't wipe out local populations. There was substantial mixing between Ibero-Roman communities and established North African and Moorish groups. This is especially visible in southern Portugal. In regions like Alentejo and the Algarve, but North African haplogroups like E-M81 reach frequencies of 10 to 15% in some populations. Spain's eastern territories saw more complete replacement. The Moors didn't just rule Portugal, they became woven into its genetic fabric. When scientists analyze DNA from both parents, from the father's line and the mother's line, the differences between Portuguese and Spanish populations become mathematically clear. Portugal clusters as Atlantic Iberian. This means stronger genetic ties to Ireland, Brittany, and western France. Spain is Mediterranean Iberian, with deeper connections to southern France, Italy, and the eastern Mediterranean. The North African influence tells an even more interesting story. Portugal generally shows higher levels of North African ancestry, between 5 and 12% depending on the region. The highest percentages appear in the south. In Spain, this number varies more and is often lower, except in specific areas like Andalusia. Germanic markers reveal another division. Portugal has a concentrated Suebi Northern European signature in the north. Haplogroups like I1 and R1BU106 appear at around 5 to 8% in northern Portugal. Spain has a broader but more diluted Visigothic influence spread across the entire peninsula. Spain received significantly more Eastern Mediterranean DNA from ancient Greek colonies, Phoenician settlements, and Byzantine traders, especially along the eastern and southern coasts. Portugal, sitting on the Atlantic edge, received far less. Both nations share Celtic ancestry, but Portugal shows direct continuity with ancient pre-Roman populations like the Lusitanians and Galaici. When you plot Portuguese and Spanish individuals on a genetic map of Europe, they form distinct clusters despite sharing a border. But the story becomes even more visible when you look at Portugal itself. Northern Portugal, particularly regions like Minho, shows strong Celtic and Germanic influences. People here tend to have lighter skin, blue or green eyes, and blonde or light brown hair. These traits link directly to Northern European ancestry. Rural northern regions maintain more genetic continuity with ancient groups, while urban centers show more recent genetic input. Central Portugal, including the Beiras and Douro Valley, displays a more balanced genetic profile. Celtic, Roman, and Moorish influences blend here. People in central Portugal show a wide range of physical traits, from light skin and eyes in the north to darker Mediterranean features further south. Central Portugal serves as a transition zone where diverse influences mixed over thousands of years. Southern Portugal tells yet another story. In the Alentejo and Algarve regions, the influence of Neolithic farmers, Romans, Moors, and Sephardic Jews is strongest. People here are more likely to have olive skin, dark hair, and brown eyes. What created these regional differences? Portugal established its borders in 1139. For nearly 900 years, the border has remained one of the most stable in the world. While Spanish kingdoms constantly merged and split, Portugal stayed unified, always looking outward to the Atlantic. This stability created genetic drift. For 9 centuries, the Portuguese became a tighter genetic family. They descended from Ice Age Atlantic pioneers, were influenced by the Suebi, shaped by an integrated Moorish past, and refined by a millennium of independence. The border didn't just separate nations, it separated gene pools. Spain's genetic diversity reflects its role as a crossroads between the Mediterranean and continental Europe. Portugal's reflects its unique position as an Atlantic refuge that absorbed influences selectively and maintained biological continuity. Today, this ancient divergence is still visible. Walk through Lisbon or Porto, and you're walking through chapters of history written in DNA. Every face in Portugal reaches back to the Ice Age, the Atlantic hunter-gatherers who survived when Europe froze, the Suebi, who built a kingdom in the northwest and stayed, some of the Moors, who didn't just rule, but integrated into the population, and the 900-year-old border that turned neighbors into genetic strangers. Portugal and Spain share a peninsula, but their DNA tells completely different stories. One is Mediterranean, diverse, and continental. The other is Atlantic, isolated, and ancient. The maps show them side by side. The genes show them worlds apart. This is the genetic mystery of Iberia. 2 nations, 1 border, and a biological divide that started in the Ice Age and never truly closed.